Of course, I have done this upon what appears to me to be sufficient reasons, and yet I think it best for you to know that there are some things in regard to which I am not quite satisfied with you. I believe you to be a brave and skillful soldier, which, of course, I like. I also believe you do not mix politics with your profession, in which you are right. You have confidence in yourself, which is a valuable, if not an indispensable quality. You are ambitious, which, within reasonable bounds, does good rather than harm, but I think that during General Burnside's command of the army you have taken counsel of your ambition, and thwarted him as much as you could, in which you did a great wrong to the country, and to a most meritorious and honorable brother officer. I have heard, in such a way, as to believe it, of your recently saying, that both the army and the government needed a dictator. Of course, it was not for this, but in spite of it, that I have given you command. Only those generals who gain successes can set up as dictators. What I now ask of you is military success, and I will risk the dictatorship. The government will support you to the utmost of its ability, which is neither more nor less than it has done and will do for all commanders. I much fear that the spirit which you have aided to infuse into the army, of criticizing their commander and withholding confidence from him, will now turn upon you. I shall assist you, as far as I can, to put it down. Neither you nor Napoleon, if he were alive again, could get any good out of an army, while such spirit prevails in it. And now beware of rashness. Beware of rashness, but with energy and sleepless vigilance go forward, and give us victories. You are not a Coolidge, a McKinley or a Lincoln. You want to know whether this philosophy will operate for you in everyday business contacts. Will it? Let us see. Let us take the case of W.P. Gore of the War Company, Philadelphia. The War Company had contracted to build and complete a large office building in Philadelphia by a certain specified date. Everything was going along well. The building was almost finished, when suddenly the subcontractor making the ornamental bronze work to go on the exterior of this building declared that he couldn't make delivery on schedule. What? An entire building held up. Heavy penalties. Distressing losses. All because of one man. Long-distance telephone calls. Arguments. Heated conversations. All in vain. Then Mr. Gore was sent to New York to beard the bronze lion in his den. Do you know you are the only person in Brooklyn with your name? Mr. Gore asked the president of the subcontracting firm shortly after they were introduced. The president was surprised. No, I didn't know that. Well, said Mr. Gore, when I got off the train this morning, I looked in the telephone book to get your address, and you were the only person in the Brooklyn phone book with your name. I never knew that, the subcontractor said. He checked the phone book with interest. Well, it's an unusual name, he said proudly. My family came from Holland and settled in New York almost 200 years ago. Quote, he continued to talk about his family and his ancestors for several minutes. When he finished that, Mr. Gore complimented him on how large a plant he had, and compared it favorably with a number of smaller plants he had visited. It is one of the cleanest and neatest bronze factories I ever saw, said Gore. I've spent a lifetime building up this business, the subcontractor said, and I'm rather proud of it. Would you like to take a look around the factory? During this tour of inspection, Mr. Gore complimented the other man on his system of fabrication, and told him how and why it seemed superior to those of some of his competitors. Gore commented on some unusual machines, and the subcontractor announced that he himself had invented those machines. He spent considerable time showing Gore how they operated, and the superior work they turned out. He insisted on taking his visitor to lunch. So far, mind you, not a word had been said about the real purpose of Gore's visit. After lunch, the subcontractor said, now, to get down to business. Naturally, I know why you were here. I didn't expect that our meeting would be so enjoyable. You can go back to Philadelphia with my promise that your material will be fabricated and shipped, even if other orders have to be delayed. Mr. Gore got everything that he wanted without even asking for it. The material arrived on time, and the building was completed on the day the completion contract specified. Would this have happened had Mr. Gore used the hammer and dynamite method generally employed on such occasions? Dorothy Wroblewski, a branch manager of the Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, Federal Credit Union, reported to one of our classes how she was able to help one of her employees become more productive. We recently hired a young lady as a teletrainee. Her contact with the customers was very good. She was accurate and efficient in handling individual transactions. The problem developed at the end of the day, when it was time to balance out. The head teller came to me and strongly suggested that I fire this woman. She is holding up everyone else because she is so slow in balancing out. I've shown her over and over, but she can't get it. She's got to go. The next day I observed her working quickly and accurately when handling the normal everyday transactions, and she was very pleasant with the customers. It didn't take long to discover why she had trouble balancing out. After the office closed, I went over to talk with her. She was obviously nervous and upset. I praised her for being so friendly and outgoing with the customers, and complimented her for the accuracy and speed used in that work. I then suggested we review the procedure we use in balancing the cash drawer. Once she realized I had confidence in her, she easily followed my suggestions and soon mastered this function. We have had no problems with her since then. Beginning with praise is like the dentist who begins his work with Novocaine. The patient still gets a drilling, but the Novocaine is pain-killing. A leader will use. Principle 1. Begin with praise and honest appreciation. 2. How to criticize and not be hated. For Charles Schwab was passing through one of his steel mills one day at noon, when he came across some of his employees smoking. Immediately above their heads was a sign that said no smoking. Did Schwab point to the sign and say, "Continue red"? Oh, no, not Schwab. He walked over to the men, handed each one a cigar, and said, "I'll appreciate it, boys, if you will smoke these on the outside." They knew that he knew that they had broken rule, and they admired him because he said nothing about it, and gave them a little present, and made them feel important. Couldn't he keep from loving a man like that, could you? John Wanamaker used the same technique. Wanamaker used to make a tour of his great store in Philadelphia every day. Once he saw a customer waiting at a counter. No one was paying the slightest attention to her. The salespeople, oh, they were in a huddle at the far end of the counter laughing and talking among themselves. Wanamaker didn't say a word. Quietly slipping behind the counter, he waited on the woman himself, and then handed the purchase to the salespeople, to be wrapped as he went on his way. Public officials are often criticized for not being accessible to their constituents. They are busy people, and the fault sometimes lies in overprotective assistants who don't want to overburden their bosses with too many visitors. Carl Langford, who has been mayor of Orlando, Florida, the home of Disney World, for many years, frequently admonished his staff to allow people to see him. Claimed he had an open-door policy, yet the citizens of his community were blocked by secretaries and administrators when they called. Finally the mayor found the solution. He removed the door from his office. His aides got the message, and the mayor has had a truly open administration since the day his door was symbolically thrown away. Simply changing one three-letter word can often spell the difference between failure and success in changing people without giving offense or arousing resentment. Many people begin their criticism with sincere praise followed by the word, but an ending with a critical statement. For example, in trying to change a child's careless attitude toward studies, we might say, "We're really proud of you, Johnny, for raising your grades this term. But if you had worked harder on your algebra, the results would have been better." In this case, Johnny might feel encouraged until he heard the word "but." He might then question the sincerity of the original praise. To him, the praise seemed only to be a contrived lead into a critical inference of failure. Credibility would be strained, and we probably would not achieve our objectives of changing Johnny's attitude toward his studies. This could be easily overcome by changing the word "but" to "and." "We're really proud of you, Johnny, for raising your grades this term, and by continuing the same conscientious efforts next term, your algebra grade can be up with all the others." Now, Johnny would accept the praise, because there was no follow-up of an inference of failure. We have called his attention to the behavior we wish to change indirectly, and the chances are he will try to live up to our expectations. Calling attention to one's mistakes indirectly works wonders with sensitive people who may resent bitterly any direct criticism. Marge Jacob of Woonsocket, Rhode Island, told one of our classes how she convinced some sloppy construction workers to clean up after themselves when they were building additions to her house. For the first few days of the work,